Round 2 is done and dusted, and the term "a week is a long time in footy" is alive and strong. That's for sure. With 3 really big, teams that got absolutely smashed. There were really big upsets this week, which is pretty crazy. The bounce backs from a few teams was really, really cool to see. Obviously, the Warriors being a big one there. You had the Tigers show a fair bit in attack, obviously, to get them in a spot to win against the Eels, which we'll speak about a few of these teams very, very shortly. But a big shout out to the Warriors for their massive win, the Roosters for their massive win against the Panthers. And a lot of us after round 1 were like, yep, Eagles are a top 5, potentially top 4 team there. You've got Panthers who will be a top 4 side, Roosters probably not. And then we also saw the Raiders who came out and played great in Vegas, really touched up the Broncos, and it was great to see. It was absolutely great to see from their club standpoints, but it made it very, very difficult to tip. For one, I did personally pick up 4 out of 8 this week for my tips, which the main one I missed out was the Dragons. Them going down by 1. I thought they were specials to win that game, and it's very much shown that they were up 10 or whatever it was with not too long to go. Their defense is very, very leaky for a side in the Bunnies that don't have a lot of attack right now without Latrell and without Murray through the middle, and had a couple of issues in that game with head knocks and injuries to hamstrings with a couple of their edge forwards. That was a pretty tough loss for the Dragons. So 4 from 8 for me. It's a pretty solid week. Still sitting, I think, 3rd out of my family tipping comp. So top quarter of that, and imagine I'm sort of sitting middle or a little bit above the general pack after a 6 last week into a 4 in this week. So number 2 point, guys, is errors. They were absolutely ridiculous, and as I said, shout out to the Tigers for a nice win for their fan base after going 3 spoons on the trot. That was very, very ideal for them. But that's the reason why these teams lost. You look at the Eagles, and Turbo in that first half was terrible. You had Walsh that whole game, terrible, unfortunately, for their standards, and they were the big proponents for a lot of errors. And you had the grit and determination of teams like the Roosters to get over the Panthers, who had a terrible game errors-wise as well. You saw the Eels and the Tigers today, both teams pretty poor in their error counts, and then the Tigers were much better in the second half and cleaned a lot of that up heading into the back end of the first half, and the rest of the second half they were much better on that with ball in hand, and the Eels could not catch up at all and play any better, because there should have been 32-0. They scored right at the end, and the desperation from some of those Tigers players was absolutely impressive. So that was great to see. The Broncos, it wasn't just Walsh, but he was a big proponent, and same with the Eagles with Turbo. For sure, and it was across the board with the Panthers as well, and also that Dragons-Rabbitohs game definitely had some errors in it as well. And then teams like the Dolphins, unfortunately, just weren't good enough, and that's where we'll get on to this next point. We know who the Cowboys, the Eels, and the Dolphins are very, very quickly, unfortunately. Cowboys shouldn't be very good this year. Eels, unfortunately, without Moses, they're nothing, and their effort, their ability to hold the footy, all of those points in one, absolutely terrible right now. And then Dolphins as well. They just don't seem like they're clicking well enough. They are leaking some points, and they held it in together in that second half, which was a good showing for them. But they're not clicking at the moment, and they don't have that attack, and I think they'll get beat fairly comfortably for a little while until they're able to sort out that attack. But it's good to see Isaiah Katoa have a couple of nice moments. But those 3 defensively pretty poor. And then you've also got the Bunnies, the Dragons, and the Titans, very, very leaky in defense as well. So there's those 6 teams. If your squad, if your fantasy players, if your supercoach players come up against those teams, you'll be very, very excited from an attacking standpoint. So 6 teams already out of the 17 that you can be pretty excited to come up against, and none of them too dissimilar to the other in terms of how many points they could leak on any given day. Titans, we have only seen the one matchup from them, and they didn't look very good at all. What they did look like is exactly how they started last season. We remember what happened with Keeney and that. They just had a terrible go forward. Obviously had Tino in this one, who was very, very helpful. Him coming back, I thought he was one of the standout players of the weekend, just with some of his efforts in his first game back from a really long injury layoff. It was very early last season, round 5 or 6 or 7, something like that. He was out and he hasn't played since. So for him to come back, score a try, look incredible, I thought that was massive. And that's going to help the Titans going forward for sure. But what we're worried about with them is their attack and the ability to flow. They only had a couple of tries down that left-hand side where it was just, quick get the ball out to AKP, and Beau Fermor was really good on that side as well in attack. And they didn't have a lot else. Their halves didn't mesh well. Unfortunately, as an AJ Brimson owner myself and Yongi in the Eels, it was a tough couple of wing fullback points scorers for me, especially when I had Stafford Toa on the bench and Lockie Hubner. That would have been a nice little turnaround for sure, and I would have been sitting here absolutely cheering for my fantasy week and in a pretty good spot overall. But slow and steady to kick off every season is where it ends up for my side personally, and I imagine a bunch of yours. That luck side of it, we just need that little bit. To have some low scores from a heap of players was pretty tough going. But you see that with Titans and a few teams out there. You think you've got a bit of a handle on how a team's going to play, and then they show you the complete opposite, and error counts and these types of things, just having having plenty of clunkiness and no stability and no consistency in what they're looking to get out of attack. You saw Brimson go over for what should have been a try, and he stuffed that one up sadly, and there wasn't great to see from them, and Campbell there was not much good to see with him, despite the fact he still managed to get to like the 40. We'll speak about them. We'll speak about them once we've got their final scores tomorrow morning. But Titans, I do expect them to improve. It's only been one game. Are they going to have that type of bounce back that we saw with the Wars last week? A few people have mentioned that in the private crew, and it does make a lot of sense. And guys, if you haven't subscribed or followed along, you get this each and every week, the 5 things I learnt from just the NRL standpoint, and sometimes it can push its way into our fantasy and supercoach minds as well. And I'll give out my fantasy tip of the week just to round out things and look forward to round 3. We always have a couple of things that go really well in our weeks. We have a couple of things that don't go so well, and we also have some injuries. My crazy thing, which we'll speak about in a sec, but looks like Hosking's probably going to be injured as well. So from all reports, it sounds like he thinks that he's broken his hand or wrist, which isn't great, and would be a forced trade from my side. Looks like Lockie Hubner's been given a 2-match ban as well. So they're 2 super frustrating things coming out of my side, but it does give us at least a looper for next week, which would have been helpful this week, although I think would I have played Cole? I think I would have had Cole as my 5th emergency like I did anyway, given he played one of the earlier games. But it is what it is on that. But the standout players of the week were Greg Marzoo, Luke Metcalf, Tino Sulamalawi, Jamie Humphries, and Payne Haas, and also Matty Nicholson. I had to give the 6 of those guys a wrap. Tino for his bounce back from a big injury. Humphries for icing that game for the Bunnies. Payne Haas for being Payne Haas. Wow. Luke Metcalf for the massive bounce back and silencing the doubters, including myself, for his fantasy scores in that game against Manly. I didn't think it was going to be great, and he obviously did well. And I'm glad that we're moving on to round 3, and I can put that game to the side because that wasn't very fun, along with guys like Isaiah Yeo and their scores. We're praying for a bounce back, and hopefully he was just sick and he comes back well. But Greg Marzoo is absolutely incredible, and the offload game from him and Payne Haas, if you own both of them in fantasy, you are absolutely flying right now. And just a little pain point as well around the offload, as we know how much I love that. An offload is 4 points. Jaden Campbell in that game this evening, he's caught in the end goal. He throws a ball basically almost out and then throws back to like Phil Sami or something, who just like dives on the ball. And Campbell gets 4 points for that. That is the equivalent. Just him passing it and Sami getting caught, right? Almost ended up in a try for the other team. Ended up being a line dropout. It's the same as a line break. And just 1 point under a try assist. 2 points more than a beautiful line break assist. I still find this incredibly wild how that an offload ended up getting to 4 points in NRL Fantasy. One day we'll get a change. I'll continue to harp on it. But those things are completely wild, in my opinion. And ladies and gents, to finish off this video, and a big thanks to all for being here, my fantasy tip of the week. So, just wanted to kind of settle things down, because I'm a bit hot and heavy, a bit annoyed at times myself. But the carnage, it comes. And it's happened so far with a couple of those relevant players with Hosking. And obviously saw Burton go down injured, really kick our and we'll get some more information on who's going to replace them very soon. But the carnage comes, and there's going to be a bunch of things that we really can't control. We had Yo's lowest score in 6 years in any time he's got decent minutes. Burton doesn't get injured. Had him in my supercoach team, so that was frustrating. So luck is definitely a wonderful thing, and you'll personally have some lucky weeks. Sometimes you'll have some lucky players in a week, or things work out for you. Watson getting a double. These types of things in my side was very, very helpful. And it was a player that is highly owned, but not by everyone. And having an 88 or whatever it is in your score in your week is absolutely massive. But you're going to have the unlucky things as well. Some weeks you'll have an absolute perler. Some weeks you'll have a shocker. But the following week might be a good one for you. So there's some things we can't control. Picking the wrong player, these types of things, you can only rectify them. And that's what we have trades for. And I wish we had more than 2 this week. But we can just chip away 1 week at a time and get things to be as good as possible. So that's my fantasy tip of the week around that. We definitely learn something different in each game. So be ready to pivot on a team, on a player. If you think one team might be a really good squad to potentially buy players from, and then the next week comes along and they've lost their best player and they're not as exciting now, or they start to play poor, and it's like, oh, wow, no, their attack looks junk, and my players that I want aren't going to get that good score. We saw with Broncos, Shibasaki was hot property, and they come up against the Raiders, they play terribly, and then people might be off him, off Goz, he got less minutes. These types of things, they happen in a flash. But next week and the following 3 weeks, I believe, the Broncos have terrific matchups, and Reece Walsh got a -2. I personally don't own him, and I know there's not a hell of a lot of people that do. My girlfriend does, for one. But he's got 3 really nice matchups, and I can't see him playing ever that bad again. So he's a guy that you should be holding. He's going to lose a lot of cash. People are going to flock to him probably next week. Round 3, round 4 potentially, when he's closer to 600k, and then he could go 60, 70, and have a cracking bunch of games. And they could lose Adam Reynolds to an injury, and then Walsh is kicking. Things like this change overnight. So guys like Walsh, Shibasaki, they'll probably have really good weeks next weweek. Pat Carrigan, Haas might hit a 50 next week or get injured. We don't know. All these things are so up in the air, and it changes at the flip of a button, at the flip of a switch, I should say. So stick with it, make your trades, keep watching the vids, have plenty of fun. Thanks for being here, and we'll catch you in that update tomorrow. We'll get into my round results and get into a lovely round 3's worth of carnage. See you guys.